Hello and welcome to In the Making, a series of conversations from North Bennett Street School where we connect with a range of new voices, fields, and perspectives. Before we get going, I want to recognize and thank the Dora Foundation and Eaton Vance for making this program possible. Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name is Kristen Odell. I'm an NBSS staff member and host of In the Making. Today we're sharing and learning about The Beat of Blossoms, the creative work of Jamila Zahra Felton. In conversation with our friend and bookbinding graduate Erin Fletcher, we will explore Jamila's book arts, sewing her personal stories into her work, and zines as communication tools. A former Boston and Washington, D.C. public school teacher, Jamila works as a school librarian and has over 19 years of experience educating youth and adults. Through The Beat of Blossoms, Jamila explores memory, identity, love, self-care, power, and Black futures. Thank you both for being with us today. Hello. I'm going to turn this over to you, Jamila.
All right, I'm going to share. All right.
All right, well, hi, Jamila. I want to thank you myself for being a part of this talk. I'm really looking forward to it and talking about your work and your process some more.
Sorry.
All right. So I want to get started with talking about paper making and how that is involved in your practice. And so I thought we would get started with your involvement with the Pyramid Atlantic Art Center and your experience there as their Gregory Vita Paper Arts resident.
Yeah, so in 2018, I saw the application for the opportunity, and I hadn't made paper before. And as someone who was expressing myself through books and zines, I thought that the opportunity to learn how to make paper and experiment would be a really great opportunity for me to move forward and kind of take my ideas to another place. So what you're seeing here is the book that I was working on while in the residency, and it's actually a page from a book. And I didn't finish the book, but How Does Your Mother Resist is a book that I'm still working on, and I made paper from cotton. So this is cotton paper on which I screen printed original designs and original poetry. And so the bulk of my work was working on this text, which will be an accordion book once it's done. It's almost done. While at Pyramid, though, I was able to, and here's just some shots of me on the left working with cotton, and on the right working with denim paper. So it was just a wonderful experience. And I chose this picture because it's so physical, making paper. For those of you who've made it before, right? It's the whole body. You're getting wet, the floor is wet, your pants are probably wet, even with, a waterproof apron on.
Yeah, you can't avoid it.
Right? You can't avoid it. The first time I was like, oh my goodness, what's going on? And then the next time you're like, yes, this is great. You're all in. And so it's extremely enjoyable, and you're in it, and you go through the process, and at the end you get this lovely, gorgeous paper. And so the denim paper was really exciting because, of course, my favorite color is blue, and I just learned that, oh my gosh, there's this pulp that I can use, and I can make really lovely, rich, just delicious, gorgeous blue paper. Here I was experimenting also with pulp painting. So, you color the pulp, the turquoise or cyan, right? I colored cotton pulp and then painted it within the denim sheets while it's drying. And it's just a lot of fun. It's just so much fun, and there's so much that can happen and that you can do with the fibers and with paper. And the experience was short. It was like 3-4 months, and I want to go back and do more, and I plan to do it. This here is abaca paper. It's in the banana family, the plant, and so I also got to play around with translucence and just seeing how to embed images within different sheets of really thin abaca pulp. And so that's what you see here. The image on the left is my mom profile, and I use her in my work a lot. And that's just pattern tissue from dressmaking patterns. So I was playing around with that, and yeah, so it was just a wonderful opportunity. In January, I started making paper at home a little bit, and that has been fun. This is what I've been doing in January, just a few months ago, probably the last time I was really creative and in the moment this year. And so still working with embedding images within sheets of paper. That's a woman holding a tobacco plant. It's an image from the Library of Congress. And on the right is just some cowrie shell pattern that I'm working with. So I've been—
Jamila, the image, sorry, the image on the left of the woman, it's embedded in between how many sheets of the paper? Is that what's giving it that fuzziness?
Yeah, so I haven't cooched it yet. I haven't put the two sheets together yet. So there is one sheet that is pulled, and on the right with the cowrie shells are painted onto tracing paper. And I put that on top of a sheet of abaca. And then I was about to then cooch it on top to sandwich it in between the cowrie shells. Yeah.
And then they dry together?
Correct. Yeah, yeah. And that's the same technique that got this. But what I'm playing with at home, which is different from being at Pyramid, is how beaten I can get the fibers without a Hollander beater. I'm using just a blender here in my basement. So I've been kind of experimenting with how thin can I get this paper to play around with how the imagery comes through when it's after it's dry. It gets darker. So that's been fun.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure there's new challenges to not having access to that equipment. Yeah, just like working with the material in a different way.
Absolutely.
So the pieces that we are seeing on the screen right now, are these just kind of experiments, or are they actually going to be a final piece?
That's good. I think the woman with the tobacco leaf is going to be a palm leaf book. This is a woman who is part of the public domain, Department of Labor Historic Archives. And she is smiling, holding this tobacco leaf and a cutting tool in her hand. And the photograph is just lovely. And there's a lot there. So I'm going to make a book about it. But this is just the first kind of exploration.
So you talked a little bit about just like the physical aspect of paper making, and in like a prior discussion we talked about kind of the importance of the physical aspect of making, and how, for me, I feel like my art is very meditative and it's very calming. So what do you get out of the physical part of paper making?
The muscle memory, the quiet. I work with music, so there's that helps you move and helps you question and make decisions and work through problems, if there are any in the process, whether it's paper making or bookbinding. So there's joy with the music and just the physical work in the body, and then muscle memory. With paper, you have to kind of figure out, is this pulp thick enough? Is it thin enough? So you're feeling the fiber. So it's also extremely tactile, and trying to determine if the sheet will hold, if it'll be viable enough to live in a book or not. So all of that is happening. You're making those decisions, but you're moving through it, and it's a lot of fun. You get lost, the time goes. So that part is also great, yeah.
I love that. There's no clock when you're making things.
Yes. If only it could always be that way.
I know, right? And sorry, I just want to interrupt one other question. What music are you listening to when you're in the process? Everything or one thing?
Everything, but I can tell you, doing my residency at Pyramid, I was listening to Hiatus Coyote and Anderson .Paak. So this was 2018, and it was just great, R&B, soul, electronic soul, hip hop. Yeah.
Do you think that the music influenced the paper making at all?
Well,
because if you're moving your body a lot, it can
that's
change
funny.
the formation of the paper?
At that point, I'm not dancing as much as I'm more
Okay.
So I'm singing, so that helps because I'm just like in the song, in the moment, and like doing the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did the residency affect your art making moving forward? Are you incorporating paper making a lot into your work now?
Well, the first thing it provided was just access. I had
Mhm.
Pyramid is a place where I learned how to do my favorite stitch, the Coptic Stitch, the pear needle we'll probably talk about. And it's a lovely space, and I love the people who work there, and the artists are really awesome. So even in the space, I'm just always learning, meeting people, seeing how I can push what I'm doing further. I didn't go to school for art, so I'm always just learning new things.
Mm.
So in that way, it's just like the access and the opportunity to learn and grow and meet and challenge myself
Yeah.
as a maker. And absolutely, prior to this, I was making books just as blank journals.
Mm.
So now with paper making and then more screen printing, it's more of my ideas, my words, my images, the content, building that out. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
excited.
you can realize your full ideas now.
Yeah, which is great.
Can we talk about the piece you made for Pyramid Atlantic's 10 by 10 Invitational? Just your involvement with that and how the piece came together.
Yeah, so this is called Listen to Black Women, and I made it last fall. I was playing around with stencils and acrylic paint, acrylic ink, and paper. So the black pieces you see are paper collage. And everything else is ink or paint. And you've probably heard that term in mainstream media, Listen to Black Women. It came up a lot related to Stacey Abrams and voting rights work in Georgia and grassroots organizing throughout the country. So it's just something I was thinking about then in the fall, obviously around elections, but just around everything else with resistance and people listening and joining up, collective care, mutual aid. And so this came about, and I'm always thinking about portals and time. And so these shapes are kind of me thinking about that, and just like doorways, openings, access. Yeah.
What's the size of this piece?
It's small. It's 10 by 10, so 10 inches by 10 inches. Yeah. I don't know. There's one around here somewhere, but 10 by 10. And being a member of Pyramid gave me the chance to kind of work on this series. I wasn't sure which one I liked better, so I made a bunch of different ones, different layout of the women's profiles, the silhouettes, and different orientation of the colors. So it was just another great way to play with ideas.
You had mentioned in one of the inclusion pieces that you use the profile of your mother. Is the profile in this piece a specific woman, or were you like referencing anyone?
That's a good question. I've been playing with this specific one for a while, so I think it is from my mom originally, but then as you cut, things change and trace and work. So yes and no.
It's evolved, yeah.
Yep.
Great. I would love to move on to, I think, the next slide. Yes. So this was a piece that was featured at an exhibit called DMV Color, which was on display in 2019 and 2020 at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, which was an exhibit that was celebrating women of color in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. So how did you get involved with that specific exhibit? And then can you talk more about this work?
Yeah, so the DC Art Book Fair takes place or has been taking place at the museum. And so I tabled there for a couple of years, and it's a book arts fair for book artists, zinesters, people experimenting in print, culture. And, you know, just being in the museum, you're able to meet people there. And so I met a couple of women on the library staff, and they were saying, you know, we're thinking about this exhibition in the future featuring book artists, zinesters, women of color in this area. And I was like, yes, I'm interested. So from there, you know, we exchanged information, had a dialogue. I shared my work with them, and they decided on purchasing a few pieces. And this is the one that they selected for the exhibition. And it's called The Deep End, or Some of Us Learned How to Swim. And it's a 10 needle Coptic stitch book. So in order to get the variations in color in the thread along the book's spine, I used 10 different needles at the paired station, so 5 stations with 10 needles. And it was fun. And inside there's a poem. The book is about police brutality and transparency and accountability. And it's from 2016. So it's like, it's dated, but not, right? And it explores drowning in just what I felt a lot of us were drowning in at the time. For example, a sea of bullets, a sea of bodies, a sea of blame, a sea of blue. And so I was playing around with that in this book. And I used some vellum, so some transparent pages, but then just this really dark navy. You know, I like blue, I mentioned that already. So more blue. But I played around with the dark pages and a dark ink, just to explore the idea of the poem. But yeah, it's a fun book. It's a tall book. And actually, I can't tell you the dimensions right now, but it's relatively tall.
You mentioned briefly the Coptic Stitch, which was a structure you learned at Pyramid Atlantic. And why the Coptic Stitch? Is it something that you use often in your work?
I use it often because it requires sewing, a lot of sewing.
Mm-hmm.
It's exposed, so you see the threads, you see the spine, whereas, you know, other standard hardcover books, the sewn threads are, you know, hidden. But in this case, you see the work, which is gorgeous, and you can play around with color. Like, oh my gosh, my favorite part about book arts are really the thread, sort of. That's kind of my number one favorite thing, is just the colors of thread. I have almost every color, and they're just lovely. And you can, based on the ideas you're exploring or the paper that you have, you can really just have fun with that. And so with this stitch, I was like, okay, I'm going to use 4 different shades of blue and some white and some black, and see what I can do with this tall, long book. And just with every time I do Coptic, the first most exciting thing is picking the thread.
Mm-hmm.
And like paper making, you know, you're in the zone, and you just stitch, and working with 2 needles is even more exciting. So yeah, a 10 needle Coptic seems very daunting. It's a structure that I teach as an introduction, or part of my introduction course. And you know, we start with 4 needles. I'm like, if you want to go crazy, we can do 6, but 10, that's impressive. Well, you know, I had it at the end of the table, right? And so I have them hanging, and I can manipulate them and keep them from crossing.
Yeah, I'm often using my body as sort of points of separation for all those needles.
Absolutely. And the easy thing is, I knew the colors, like with this specific book, right? I knew that it was going from light to dark, the values. So getting them mixed up didn't really happen.
Yeah. I liked what you just mentioned earlier, though, about how it's exposed, and that that labor, that work isn't hidden. You know, as a practicing bookbinder, a lot of what we do is hidden behind the cover of the book. And so it's nice when you have those opportunities where it makes sense to keep that exposed.
beautiful, and then it's challenging because you're dealing with tension, you're dealing with you don't want to rip the paper. I mean, there are a lot of things you're working through and problem solving while enhancing just this gorgeous material.
I was just going to address that for you both, for Erin and your work as well as the maker. Just what you said, nobody sees this work because it's always covered up with what is it called? The end. And the cover on the spine.
Yeah.
I'm not a bookbinder, obviously, but it's one of those things. I mean, everybody in this institution and makers, it is those things that you never get to show off, like all the splines in the side of the drawer. So it's I love it. I just want to give my appreciation to that.
And just talking about the other materials you used on this particular book, is the paper all handmade by you as well?
No, this is all store-bought paper. So the covers are made from Lacta, which is a plant-based paper, and it's lovely. It has that nice bumpy, rich texture. Sometimes you can see the plant fibers in it, and it comes in all these luscious colors. Again, color. The inside, on which I printed the poem, that's just from Paper Source. And they make a rich navy that you can print on in a laser. And then the signatures, each little section of the book is the same Lacta paper, that blue. And then the vellum, again, that's store-bought. And this was again before, this was 2016, so before I started to experiment with paper at Pyramid.
Another question about this book. This is the whole bulk of the text. Is that also your poem?
Yes, one
Okay.
poem.
So the entire thing. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you talk more about just your background, kind of how you even heard about like book arts as a medium, and just how you introduced yourself to that work?
I'm a librarian. Before I was a librarian, I was an English teacher. So books have always been my jam, just reading and teaching about them. When I transitioned out of the formal classroom, I went into libraries, and I was already expressing myself at that time, being a creative writer, poetry, and mixed media collage. And it just, I don't know, I can't give you the exact moment, but it was just a logical next step for me to express myself. I was like, oh, maybe I'll publish a book of poetry. And I was like, do I want an editor? Do I want to go through all of that? I can do it myself. and I was thinking about self-publishing, chapbooks and all that. And then artist books and zines kind of was the next logical step for me. In that way. Yeah. So librarianship is the real way that I got to it though.
Yeah. And then were you mostly learning techniques through Pyramid Atlantic, or did you have exposure elsewhere?
Pyramid Atlantic is the main place, particularly for the Coptic Stitch, the paired needle one that I love so much. But I had made accordions prior, and one was at a library public program, actually with Susan Kapuscinski-Gaylord, which you all probably know because she's out of Massachusetts. So I took a workshop with her while I was still teaching, and it was accordion. So I had done accordions, and then I taught myself stab binding, but this stitch was the one. I was like, this is the one.
Yeah, it really resonates with you.
Yeah, it's
yeah. The Coptic, I feel like, is such a recognizable sewing pattern. A lot of people, no matter what sort of skill set, I think can pick it up, but also, professionals and book artists and hobbyists, they all, I think, have experience with the Coptic. And yeah, it's a really lovely structure that I guess historically is a term that we use to describe a broader range of sewing patterns and structures, but it's really great how it's really stood the test of time and is still so relevant today for binders and artists. Yeah, so it's really cool that you like still like that you like really gravitate towards it for your work.
And two reasons I didn't mention, it lies flat and it's pretty strong. So the book can lie flat open, but also it has roots with Ethiopia. And that's more that I have to research myself. But yeah, that's another thing that's intriguing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good that you mentioned that it lies open, nice and flat. That is definitely like a big draw to it, I think, for a lot of book artists. Yeah. Okay, great. I would love to move forward and kind of just talk about the main draw of your work for me, how I was sort of first introduced to your work. And it was really just your ability to create so much texture through your use of like layering and collaging and combining multiple materials together, handmade paper, fabric. But as someone who has a past in sort of fiber arts that then got into bookbinding, I was really, I loved seeing this connection that you had both with material and language to sewing and weaving and stuff. So I would love for you to talk about kind of your connection to those materials and why they're important to use in your work.
Like most women, I could probably blame it on my mom, who's a wonderful, wonderful person and who was not a seamstress by profession, but, all my life she sewed her clothes, sewed my sister and I clothes. We were not twins, but we dressed in twin outfits. We went to the fabric stores on weekends in Chinatown in Boston. So fabric, thread, I grew up with all of that around me. Hi, Mom. And I learned how to make pillows and maybe a skirt here and there, but I never got into it. And I believe partly it's because it was so precise and like the measuring and the patterns, I just didn't enjoy it that much. And then, I was like, oh, I can express myself in a lot of different ways. And then with books, it combines my love of words, my love of books and reading, and then sewing. And that was just like the perfect storm of, my past, learning from my mom, and then all coming together. And then, so that's the kind of physical piece of it and like growing up. But then, I started to learn about my maternal great grandmother, who was a seamstress in the governor's mansion in Jamaica before she immigrated to Boston. And it's just like, wow, wait, there's just so much sewing and so much to explore with that story. And I use it in my work when thinking about history and Black women in this country specifically, sewing as an act of forced labor, having to sew for people who were enslaved and for oneself, and then sewing as an act of resistance, as joy, as sewing for, taking care of one's family, sewing to make something beautiful for oneself as self-care. Like there's so many ways to think about how we engage with thread and fabric and what we wear. And so just because I don't make clothes, I make books. And so I explore those ideas in my books. This is one example where I was using burlap and like this woven canvas cotton fabric in this book to explore this idea of threads through time and memory, and how just the warp and the weft is part of a portal. How we remember and how we move forward. And I'm always thinking about it now. So this is one book where I explore that. And I love this book so much. It's a small book.
Oh, wow. I had no idea it was so small.
It's tiny. It fits in your hand.
Wow.
And it fits in your hand because my idea is that the woman who made this would have kept it with her, either hidden inside her garment while she was sewing by a creek or at midnight under the moonlight, or in her cabin. So it's made of burlap.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just saying I agree with everything you're saying about this sort of connection with thread. And I think so many different cultures and so many different points in time, you can make these connections to fabric and thread and embroidery, in so many ways. And I love work that engages with thread. It like that immediately just like draws me in, because I already feel like maybe I have some kind of connection to it, because it can be such like an intimate activity, but it also can be used in a very powerful way too. So yeah, that is one aspect of your work that I really, really love, using thread as a form of mark making. Yeah, so
it's so beautiful. Yeah, Erin, you use a lot of thread in your work as well, and I love it. Also, this is with textile or fabric or silk or thread. That's how you get such a pigment like that you might not be able to get in another medium.
Yeah. It's rich, it's tactile, and you see the texture, and you know how it feels, whether you're, if you felt thread before, you know how it feels. And it's beautiful. Here's another Coptic binding again, exposed binds, and I was like, which color should I use? So this one, because everyone's gonna see this thread. I also like the braided, it's just lovely. I grew up with my hair always braided, so also braiding.
Can I ask a technical question about this? Because I do a lot of embroidery work on leather, and I'm always curious about the steps people take when they do embroidery on a material that is going onto a board. And so can you just talk about the material that you used for the cover, and then just I guess the steps you took to doing the stitching?
Yes, so the image that you see of the woman's face is a mixed media collage of mine, paper collage and paint. And what I did was I scanned it and I printed it out on essentially quilter's cotton that goes through your inkjet or laser printer. So I printed a collage onto the cotton, put the cotton in a hoop, and embroidered the woman's face. And after I embroidered the woman's face, then the cotton's really thin, and it's it's made for an inkjet, so it kind of has it's treated with something.
Sure.
So it's not very pliant, it's kind of firm, so it's really easy to adhere to a board. And this is the hardcover book, so I just adhered it to the book board after I embroidered, and then stitched the book.
I love that. I in my own practice, since I do a lot of embroidered bindings, I've also been trying to do research on women who created embroidered bindings in the past, from 15th century forward. And a lot of it is just women sewing something that is a personal object of theirs, and kind of just doing it in any way that like makes sense for them, for the techniques that they know. And so there's such a varied way of people putting embroidery or stitches onto a binding. So I just really wanted to know about your process, because I love hearing that.
The woman,
please keep talking.
Is my mom. So that's my mom, Juanita Brooks Wade, at her machine in the 70s. So before I was born, she's always sewing. So the little girl is from the Schomburg collection from the 1940s, just a little girl sewing in a library. And I was like, a girl sewing in a library? What? It's amazing. So that photograph, I just love. And so I made this little book with both of them. And so it's one book, and I actually have it here. One leaf is the girl and one leaf is my mom, and it's called Learning to Sew.
Can you talk a little bit about the structure, the way the pages are folded?
This is an Origami Flower fold, and it's so fun and easy. I like to teach it to children. And, you just fold and there you go. And you can adhere a bunch together. So it's super long and it's amazing chain. There's so much you can do with it.
Yeah, it has really lovely movement to it. I teach something similar to students of a young age as well. And like the movement and the folding is just so engaging.
Yes. Origami. Yeah.
Can you talk about your use of imagery? I mean, some of it is personal imagery, but some of it is found imagery. Are you, I think with this one, you said you just came across it happenstance, but are you also searching and seeking out specific imagery for your work?
Always, yes. So again, being a librarian, I love archives. I love historic images and historic sources. And there are so many that are ours, that belong to us as citizens, right? They're in our collection, Library of Congress, National Archives. So I search them, as well as, New York Public Library, the Schomburg Center for Black Culture, and state library archives, just to get rich 19th century, 20th century images of particularly Black women working, or Black women sewing, Black women always doing something. And I use those in my work. And then my mom, I don't have to go very far to get those. I have I'll go, I'm like, let me look through this photo album, or Mom, what's over there? So yeah.
That's great. And I'm assuming that sometimes the images that you just come across, they might sort of generate content for you, like you might feel inspired.
Yeah, I'll be reading a book about Black history. Like I have a book for teens about Black women in science, and in there, they're just great historic photographs. So just reading a book, or a book that's for young people, I get images and I go find the source and see where the image came from, who took it, who's in it, all that data, and ideas come from that also.
So this might be a good segue into talking about zines, unless you want to quickly talk about that image.
This is just about memory, which we've talked about.
Yeah, can you talk about your use of zines, and are they still something that you would use in your art practice now? Is that kind of from the beginning of your art practice?
Zines are great. I came across zines again when I entered librarianship, and they're just so accessible, and you can very quickly work through an idea and have something to share and give to others, and kind of just express yourself with. So they're awesome. And as someone who loves collage, it's also a great way to kind of really play around with collage and appropriated images and text, and blackout poetry and all kinds of other things, and used books, old dictionaries. So I love it for that. And this one specifically I made in 2016. And it's a one-sided mini zine, which is the best because it's one-sided, one sheet of paper, one-sided, and anyone, any age, who has scissors and a sheet of paper can instantly have like a brilliant, lovely zine with their ideas, and they're published. So it's just perfect for instant gratification, right? Like really instant.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you said, it's a very accessible way of creating a book. You need very few tools and materials to do it. So you have had some experience teaching collage work, I think, to young kids and adults. Is that correct?
Yeah. Through libraries, through arts workshops that I've had at places. I did a zine workshop just the other day with a synagogue at my work, at the school where I work. I do it with young people, middle school students and younger. And it's just a lot of fun. This is a paper quilt collage that I put into a zine called Our American Quilt. So it's just lots of fun to play around with ideas in a small, simple way. That's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. What is like, do you have any like very quick advice for anyone who wants to create a zine and they just like don't know where to start?
I would say start with your favorite magazine,
Mm,
and go with the colors and the textures in that magazine, and go from there, and think backgrounds, like this one, on Blackness, a lot of it's from National Geographic. And so that's like really easy. And the public library, when they're open, you can get free magazines like the old ones. So you don't even have to subscribe to anything. Just get yourself a free magazine and go from there. I use a typewriter, but you don't need a typewriter. You can use your own hand. But I would say favorite magazine is the way to go. And old ones are even better. The
yeah.
older. Yeah.
Do you find when teaching either older people or younger people these techniques, do you find that there's like, what's the result from each one? I'm imagining you teaching young kids to make zines, and it's a tool to not only learn how to make, but it's a tool to learn that, the form of reading something physical and not digital is, still relevant. So I'm wondering what you get from different generations who learn this technique.
The most important result is liberation. Like the person figures out in the end, like, oh my goodness, in just this amount of time, I was able to express myself in this way with this little bit of stuff. And it's freeing. I teach, process. So it's not necessarily, we're not going to have a finished zine at the end. We're not going to have a perfect book at the end. It's about the process. So it's, guiding people through that freedom of self-expression and playing around with scissors and glue and colors and textures and ideas. And I think that has been the most rewarding at the end of workshops.
Yeah.
And just having fun, because it's not about perfection or just like having something awesome to sell at the end, although you might.
So it's just about expression.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think collage work gives that freedom for people too, because they might be sort of hindered by their artistic abilities or feel like they're not good enough. And I think collage can give you that chance to create the imagery that you really want.
Yeah, and most of us have collaged.
Yeah, it's a very familiar technique. Yeah, I would love to talk now about this piece that's up on the screen, which was first published in the zine Melanation in early 2017. So can you talk a little bit about this work and your thoughts at the time of making it and how you've reflected on it since then?
This is called Remembering Requires Looking Forward. And probably mentioned this before, but I'm always thinking about memory and learning from my past, but how that, takes us forward, and that there's just this relationship between having experienced something, for example, with resistance, right? We've been here before. Like, so my foremothers, they know what to do. They've done it before. And so I was kind of going through that in this piece. That we already know how to resist because we've been resisting in different modes of life, and so that is part of memory, collective memory. It's part of, at least as a Black woman, it's part of my collective memory, what I learned from my mother and what she learned from hers. And so I was exploring that in this piece. There are some recognizable people, Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman in there, but the rest are just some historic images of Black women, like on the front lines of grassroots protests and organizing. And there's like stream of consciousness and words in the back, just about, it's daily practice, resisting, it's part of the universe, it's part of memory. Yeah.
And then I think if you want to talk about these last two pieces, these were new pieces for me. I hadn't seen them before, but I don't know when you made them, if they are newer pieces.
They're old, but they're really important because I'm still thinking about what I was trying to do. This one's called I Planted in Rose. And this is an image, the black marks that are on the base of the collage you've seen before. Like I use it all the time. And it's just this idea of seeds and stitches, both. So this is a woman named Ms. Prater. This is from the 1920s. And this is an image of her. It's in our public domain. She was enslaved, and this is an image of her as a freed woman sewing. And it just speaks to some of the things that I think about with sewing as an act of joy and resistance. And so there's that. And I just really like it. And there's a lot that I'm still thinking about with it, just with seeds and stitches and both planting and sewing and memory and time and portals and going forward and backward. And this one's called Working the Blooms. And this is an image of some young women at a tobacco factory. And I was just playing around with this idea of, I don't know, work, labor. Yeah.
Well, it looks like, I'm sorry, Erin.
It's okay, go ahead.
I mean, did you replace the tobacco with these gorgeous blooms?
I
as
did.
If to revision what they were actually doing?
Yeah.
I love that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I love this connection that you're starting to bring with seeds and flowering and like gardening and planting. And there's actually a lot of historical connections between embroidery terms and gardening, because those were both very common activities for women in the kind of the Victorian and the medieval period. So that's really, it's all kind of coming full circle and making these new connections.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jamila.
We're gonna open up for questions and Q&A. So anybody who has a question, just type it in the Q&A window, and we will take it from there.
I do have one more final question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I did want to ask Jamila what artists she finds inspiring.
Right now, Dalita Martin, always. She uses thread and she's a printmaker and her work is gorgeous. And right before the pandemic started last year, she had a show at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. And I just love her work. It's a lot of portraits, Black women, and printmaking and just the textures and the colors, and they're huge. Also, it's really inspiring. And Brianna McCarthy, who uses really rich, dark tones. Amy Sherrill, of course. So portraiture, like I'm terrible at drawing faces and painting people. So I love looking at work of women who are able to do it really, really well. I just love their work. Yeah.
A backup question to that from a guest is, what authors inspire you, Jamila?
Authors! Obviously Octavia Butler, Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Lucille Clifton, and Sasaki Shange, Audre Lorde, Jason Reynolds, since I'm a school teacher. lots of books for kids, but yeah, my favorite, lots of books for kids.
Going back to one of the small zine sample, are the actual collages bound, or are they scanned, printed, and then bound?
Yeah, so for our American quilt, I made an original paper collage from hand painted papers, as well as collage material from the internet, and I made actual paper quilts, and then I scanned it to get the master. And the original paper quilts, they're small, so they are the master. And then I typed the poem and then put it on top. And that's how I got that one. And then you have so with Zines, you have your master, and then you just photocopy from your master, and you work from there. Does that answer that question? Yeah. Yes.
Can you actually, for me and everyone else, can you give us the specific definition of a zine?
Ooh, yeah. It's a self-published work. It's usually less than 1,000 in its print, usually, but not always, reproduced on a photocopier. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I was hoping for.
Awesome.
Which comes first for you, the poetry or the book, or do they develop together?
Ooh, both and. That's a good question. Like for this one, it's like I knew I wanted something small, and I had this idea of the woman who would be writing the words or holding the book and carrying the book. So that idea was forming, and then what she would be doing or what she would be saying came from that. So it depends. Traditionally, I am a poet first. So on Blackness, you know, I knew it was about the right to remain. This is like an antidote to the talk. What I'm going to give my sons the talk about how to be in front of law enforcement, but what else am I going to give them? So this came from that. And so I was going through National Geographic and like, ooh, water, breathing, like, ooh, eclipse, they're going to eclipse fear. And it kind of came from that. So it depends. Sometimes the words come first. Sometimes they come when I have the imagery. So both and, I guess, I don't know.
Where and how are zines distributed? If I make one, then what?
Ooh, if you make one, then what? Depends on where you live, sort of. So in Washington, D.C., we have DC Zine Fest. You know, if you're in Massachusetts, there's Zine Fest. I think there's one in Somerville specifically, but most major American cities have Zine Fests. Now we're in a pandemic, so a lot of them went virtual in 2020, 2021, who knows what we'll see, but you can share them, trade them, sell them at Zine Fests, or sell them through your Etsy or some other PayPal, Venmo situation you got going on, through your Instagram, right? A lot of people doing it through Instagram and Venmo and PayPal that way. Share them with your friends, give them away first.
Yes.
Yeah.
Leave them, just leave them.
Oh gosh, yes. Like historically, we leave them at post office, coffee shops, like
totally.
Tower Records, which is gone. I won't.
Oh.
Sorry.
Tower Records. Let me jump to a question about your printing. Your printing is another beautiful aspect of your work. Can you speak more about that process?
Yeah. I've been really getting into monoprints. And that's easy because I don't need a lot of equipment. I could just do it in my space in my house and clean up really quickly. I don't need a dark room. So monoprinting, awesome, easy. I've done some block printing, but not as much just because the carving takes time. I love it, but it's like, oh, I don't have time to carve a block.
Yeah.
And then screen printing, I've started to use screen filler and drawing fluid as an easier way to not have access to a dark room at Pyramid. So I'm looking forward to my next couple of books to use screen printing and drawing fluid.
How often are you creating? Does your inspiration rise and fall rhythmically?
Oof.
That's a really hard question.
Yeah.
Yes, I have to feel it, right? But to be honest, I have a 6-month-old Jaleel and a 5-year-old kindergartner named Malcolm. So it's been hard, right? Because I'm not sleeping.
I mean, right now is a great time to say thank you for being here with us in that situation.
I know, I hear them upstairs. I'm like, oh my God. No. So, you know, when I have time, you know, it's all these ideas. I have like tons, right? I'm still thinking about memory. I'm still thinking about sewing as resistance. I'm still thinking about joy. I'm still thinking about transparency and accountability and self-care. I'm always thinking about the ideas. So I keep a list of things that I want to work on or ideas that I want to explore. And when I have time, I go for it. So I would say, How Did Your Mother Resist? That book that I started at Pyramid is what I need to work on. So that's my next big project. Maybe I'll have it. Yeah.
Can you talk to us about the sign behind you? Did you make that? And what is it about?
That's called On Solidarity #1. I made it at Pyramid 2018 in response to, well, the phrase, when your liberation is my liberation is their liberation is ours, I made specifically in response to the Women's March, the first Women's March, and Trump's inauguration. And I was just thinking about solidarity and what it meant to different people. We're actually now is a good time to think about solidarity, but that's Denim Paper. And I pulp painted the cyan, the turquoise, and then screen printed the text on top.
A question about having, sorry, Erin, jump in.
I was just gonna specify, when you say denim paper, is it actually made from denim?
Yeah, so
like recycled denim?
Yeah, so right, denim is cotton that's been dyed with indigo. So I buy the pulp already dried and flat. So I don't start with jeans, although you can with a great beater, right? I've seen it done at Pyramid. But I just start with dried denim pulp. So the fibers have really been beaten down and taken apart from what we know as jeans. Yeah, so cotton and indigo.
A question about fun, having fun when you're trying things out. How did you, I don't know if this is the way to ask this question, but how did you figure this out? Like talk about fun.
Yeah, I went to school for English literature and education. And I took like one painting class, painting for non-majors, at Spelman. So for me, everything's about having fun because I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean,
that's right? It, isn't it?
Right? Just starting out, I was like, okay, I have no idea how to make books. I have no idea how to make zines. I have no idea how to communicate this idea with this whatever. So it's always about color, texture, line, shape, which are design elements. So just using those to communicate. So it's fun to use color. It's fun to use flowers. It's fun to use like pieces of paper and scissors. And so I just go with that.
Yeah, that attitude must really take the pressure out of making.
Absolutely.
You have to make a lot of very unusual things before you strike on one that's like, oh, I love this and it works.
Yeah.
Make a lot of awkward things.
Yes, a lot of strange mixed media paintings.
I have a last question for you for my own interest. What is your origin story as far as how young were you doing creative acts? And what was the first sort of creative thing that you were doing as a young person?
Oh, dancing. Well, dancing with my sister and some friends, but probably we used to make clothes for our Snoopy. What's Snoopy's girlfriend's name? I don't know.
I don't remember.
Had a girlfriend. I don't even know if that's correct. Snoopy's girlfriend. We used to make clothes for her. So from my mom, right? Sewing, making clothes for the doll, and when you rub fashion rubbings. On fashion plates, rubbings. I would say that type of stuff my sister and I used to do all the time. But like high school, it was poetry and journaling. Like I'm a poet. College, I was a poet. It was the 90s. People were slamming all over the place. So it was just like poetry. Poetry is my jam. I was an English major. And then mixed media collage came and then
it all ties in. There's no, fashion rubbings to poetry to listening to Anderson .Paak while you're making books. Like it's all part of the same thread.
Yeah.
Thread. There we go.
I like it.
I have a last comment that I just want to read out loud because it's so lovely from a guest. Thank you so much. Your work is beautiful. I love the juxtaposition of the black and white photos against the bold jewel-like backgrounds.
Thanks.
We all do.
Yay. Color's your friend. Texture.
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
And I just want to say thank you both for taking time out of your afternoon to be here with us. It's been really wonderful. And thank you to all of our guests for being here with us. It's been great.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Kristen, North Bennett Street. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Jamila.
Yeah. And to all of you,
Kristen.
Until next time, take care. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.